Welcome to Lesson 3, titled Interactions Among Living Things. Before we get into the notes, I want to talk a little bit about the lab that we had done in class, which was titled Natural Selection Bean Lab. And you were put into groups, and when you were in each group, you were either selected to be a knife, a fork, a spoon, a forceps, or a hand. And the idea was that these sorts of things represent organisms. So the knife was an organism, the fork was an organism, the spoon was an organism, the forceps and your hand were all different types of organisms. And so in the back of the room you had cups that corresponded with your group, and so the knife people went up first. They went to the back of the room by their cups. They were given 1 minute to go back and forth to the front of the room, collect as many beans as they could on their knife, and then put them into their cup and keep doing this for 1 minute straight. Then the fork people would come to the back of the room and they would do this, and we collected as much data as we possibly could and entered it into a Google spreadsheet, and then you made bar graphs from it. So I put together the B-Day students, both first, second, third class period. So let's take a look at what their results were. They had over on this side, this is where you find the y-axis, which is your total beans collected. The x-axis has the utensils that were used, and you can see that the utensils are paired up with the colors that belong to them. So for example, the blue pairs up with the fork, the orange pairs up with the knife, the yellow pairs up with the spoon, the green pairs up with the hand, and the purple pairs up with the forceps. And so if we look at this data, we can definitely see that the green hand had the largest amount of beans collected. So this had the largest amount. Also, the least amount was the knife, which had not collected a lot of beans at all. And so the knife was the least, the hand was the most, and you could actually rank these if you wanted to. You could say that this was number 1, this was number 2, this was number 3, this was number 4, and this was last place, number 5. And so let's talk a little bit about why that might have been. When we look at the idea of the beans being the food, so here is all of your food. These are all the beans that were in the tray. And you had all these different utensils that were over here. You had your knife, you had your spoon, you had your fork, you had your hand, and you had the forceps. So that's a forceps. The idea was that you were going, each one of these represented an organism, and so as you would go and collect it, we would see which one was better suited to be able to pick up the beans. And so what we discovered is that the hand is best suited to pick up beans. Alright, and so if this is representing the food, the source of food, that means that the hand would not struggle at all to get food. Okay, this organism will be very, very well adapted to where it's living. But on the other hand, if we look at the knife, we would say something along the lines that the knife is not well suited for its environment. And this is really important to understand, because what's going to happen to this knife organism is that the numbers are going to slowly start to drop. And you're going to see one of two things happen. It is going to either emigrate to a different area, which is a term from the second section, or it's going to become better adapted to its environment. So for example, a lot of you are trying to carry on the knife and balance out putting on the beans. So you put the beans right on there and you try to balance it and walk back there. So what's going to happen is that the knife might end up stabbing into the beans and trying to collect them that way, and then alongside of that also collecting some on the top. And so it's going to, if you were to do this this activity over and over and over again, you'd come up with better ways to collect the beans. And so just like the hand was very easy to do it because all you had to do is reach in there, grab it, and pull it, and then walk to your back to the cups. Well, what's going to happen with the knives is that they're going to start to find better ways to collect them, whether it's stabbing into the beans and then putting a few on top. Its numbers are going to start to go up. And so we would call that a very important term in science, which is called natural selection. And so this lab really did a good job of showing us how organisms would change. And so let's take a look at some of these terms. The term known as natural selection is a characteristic that makes an individual better suited to its environment. Okay, so if we were looking at the lab activity, and again, those utensils are organisms, we would say that the knife is best suited for it, and then that the the knife is not well suited. Sorry about the writing, it's getting used to it. And so the characteristics that make an individual better to its environment. And then there are individuals whose characteristics are best suited for their environment tend to survive and produce. So what we would see is that if we were to look at these organisms for a long period of time, we would see that the hand would continuously be able to survive, it would continuously be reproducing. Where the knife would have one of two choices. It would either continue to decrease in population until it became extinct, or what would happen is that the knife would slowly become able to survive because it would develop new characteristics to help it be suited for its environment. And we talked about a few of those reasons why. So natural selection is the characteristics that allow it to be better suited for its environment, and then the individuals who are able to be better suited for the environment tend to survive and reproduce. Another important term in science is called adaptations, and basically an adaptation is a behavior and a physical characteristic that allows organisms to live successfully in their environment. And so what I did is I took a couple of pictures, and you can see that this is a butterfly, and the color on it you can see is green, which is matching up to the leaves. And so this is an adaptation of camouflage that would allow for this to hide from other predators. And so this is well developed and able to survive without being attacked all the time because of its camouflage. This guy over here, little squirrel that's in a tree, you'll notice that the fur on the squirrel is very similar to the bark of a tree. And so again, it's utilizing a form of adaptation which is known as camouflage to help it stay protected from other organisms by using that method. And so every organism has some form of adaptation that allows it to survive in its specific conditions. If it doesn't have some sort of adaptation, obviously it's either going to have to leave that area, or what's going to happen is that it's going to become extinct. But almost all organisms have some sort of way to deal with this, and we call that a very specific thing, which is titled a niche. Each organism has a role in its habitat, or it's how it makes its living. And so what I did is I took a couple more images. This is an ant, and the ant's niche in its organism is to bring food back to its home. And so this organism has a specific function within its habitat. If it didn't have a function in its habitat, then it would not be able to survive. Here you have a bee that is pollinating and getting pollen. So its role is to bring back some of the pollen and the sugars, and so it's going to bring that back to its hive, and in return the flower is getting pollinated also. So niche is how the organism is able to make its living in its habitat, which is important because if it doesn't have a role, it's not going to be able to survive there. Now, within an environment or an ecosystem, there are many types of interactions that are happening. And so one of the types of interactions is called competition. And competition is the idea of struggle between two organisms. It might be that they're struggling over food. It might be the fact that they're struggling over space or water or shelter. And so in this example, I have a couple of peacocks that you can see are getting ready to get competitive with one another because of the fact that it might be over territory. It might be the fact that they're going at it because of the fact that there's a fight of a food source that they're having an issue with. But competition is one form of interaction among living things. The second type of interaction is called predation. And this is where you have a predator and a prey relationship. The predator is the one doing the attacking, so we could say that this is the attacker. So it's doing the attacking. And the prey is going to be the one attacked. And so here you can see this little picture right here is an example of a bird that has flown down and taken a fish with it. And so this bird we would say is the predator. So predator. And this one down here is the prey. So predator and prey relationship. One doing the attacking, it's attacking the fish. The fish is being attacked by the bird, which is the predator. And then one other really important term is called symbiosis. And the symbiosis is a relationship between two species or many species where at least one of them benefits. And so let's take a look at those symbiotic relationships. There are three types of symbiotic relationships. One of them is called mutualism, and it's basically where both organisms benefit. So the example of the bee and the flower is a mutualistic relationship, because what's happening is that the bee is pollinating the flower, and in return the bee is able to get the sugars that it needs to take back to its hive. So the bee is benefiting from getting something from the flower, and the flower in return is getting something from the bee. So that is a mutualism or mutualistic relationship. The second one is called commensalism, and it's where one benefits and the other one is not helped, nor is it harmed. And so this example is a bird in a tree, and you have to be careful when you're looking at commensalism with a bird in a tree as your example, because in this case all the birds are really using the tree for is a shelter or a place to live. Now if we were talking about some sort of woodpecker where it would be pecking into the tree to get insects, or it's trying to get something from the tree and causing the tree to be susceptible to other types of bacteria, or possibly allowing for something to cause harm to that tree, then it would not be a commensalistic relationship. It would just be it would be a parasitic relationship then. But because of the fact that we're looking at this bird and its little babies in the tree, all they're using this for is a place to live. And so one is benefiting, which is the birds, and the tree is not being helped nor is it being harmed. It's just there. The last type is called parasitism. It's where one is benefiting and one is harmed. And this is an example of a parasitic relationship. The tick is benefiting by burrowing into your skin because of the fact that it's getting its source of food and nutrients through the blood. However, in return, the human is being hurt by that, because obviously we know that ticks have potential for Lyme's disease depending on the tick. And so this could be a parasitic relationship between the benefiting one, which is the tick, and the one that's being harmed, which is the human. And so all three of these are examples of symbiotic relationships. So symbiosis. Okay, so symbiosis, and there are three of them: mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. Okay, and so those are the notes for section number 3.